Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have another very amazing guest from my alma mater, Ohio University, Coach Brian Getz, who's the tight end coach and in charge of the kick return team. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Now, and I didn't tell you this yet, but I have been prefaced not to go easy on you by Coach Rudolph. I think the quote that he used was none of this soft alumni stuff. So so as you could expect from him.
Yep.
But before we get started and we're gonna talk tight end culture and room and some resume stuff, we're gonna talk about a lot of stuff today.
Yeah.
But Coach, I mean, you want to kind of talk about how you ended up as a tight end coach at Ohio University?
Absolutely. Well, first off, I appreciate the opportunity to join your podcast. I'm honored, and my goal is to help educate other coaches. I know that the way that I got to where I'm at today is in large part because of executive sponsorship and professional development and things of that nature. And so, to talk a little bit about my background, I'm only in the position that I'm in today as tight ends coach here at Ohio because of Frank Solich and Tim Albin. So I came here after graduating from Notre Dame in 2013. And I came here to join the Ohio Sports Ed grad program, which is a really reputable grad program. Thought I wanted to work in fundraising or ticket sales or something in sports. And I very, very quickly realized that I missed being a part of a team. When I was at Notre Dame, I was a student manager with football. Got to be on the practice field every day, develop relationships with players, see that growth, and really be in the nitty gritty, right? In the day to day. And when I came here, it just, it didn't hit it for me. It didn't do it for me. So I came over to the football building where they gladly accepted my volunteerism. And I started out folding envelopes and doing the recruiting mailers and all the kind of generic office work that's required of running a Division I football program. and I developed, some amount of reputation for not being too much of a mess up and showing up on time and doing my job. And things grew from there. So Coach Isperding, who's still our quarterbacks coach, asked me to be a student assistant just because of my experience being a manager at Notre Dame. And that was fantastic. And then things kind of went from there. I'm a boomerang employee of Ohio University. I've left and come back and left and come back because, as you know, Athens is a very special place and the people here are fantastic. And it's provided me a lot of opportunities. So I've gone from intern here to graduate assistant to full-time position coach over the last 7 or 8 years. And this place has been really, really special to me. And so, I can't talk about my journey without first, pointing to the wonderful people that have given me these opportunities and really built into me and helped me grow.
Who was the head coach when you were a student assistant at Notre Dame?
Brian Kelly.
Brian Kelly.
So my freshman year was Charlie Weiss's last season.
Okay.
And I was not a part of the football program that year, stepping foot on campus, and my eyes very wide. But I got the opportunity to do. I did the Rudy 9 yards thing. I mean, I did the paint the helmet and scrape the grass off the cleats and set up the drills during the early morning workouts during the spring. And it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. Coach Kelly came in that there's a great, very professional tradition, like you would imagine at Notre Dame, that, they don't just take anybody off the street. There's some regiment to it and some structure, and being a student manager and doing the laundry and setting up the drills and being accountable and all that stuff. And it was a wonderful, really, really great opportunity to see as a student, the behind the scenes of, a big time college football program. I was really lucky.
Now, before we get into the culture stuff, we talked about this before we came on, and you reposted, oh God, what was that, 2 weeks ago? The resume idea by Coach Dottie, but with your spin on. Do you want to kind of explain what that is and kind of what that is? Because it's pinned at the top of Coach. I don't know if it'll still, when this post, it'll still be pinned on there or not, but you want to kind of explain that, Coach?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really inspired by a basketball coach. His name's Craig Doty. I've never met Coach Doty. We've only interacted via Twitter, which I think is kind of the power of social media in that way, just like you and I connecting in this way. And so Coach Doty basically he does a great job of sharing professional development tips and tricks for young coaches. He's a head college basketball coach at Emporia in Kansas, and he shared his resume last summer. I think it was May around this time, and he shared his resume and some screenshots on Twitter with pictures and some advice on get a graphic designer and make sure you highlight these areas. And a year ago, 12 months ago, we were all hunkered down, sitting inside, making big plans to write the next great American novel or whatever we were going to do in COVID quarantine. And, I pinned it as an idea. And I actually didn't return to it until this spring. After our spring practices were over, I had a little bit more time, to dig into some projects. And I decided to take his inspiration and turn, what is usually a resume of, bullet points in a, Word document into something that was, a little bit more visually appealing, but also maybe better able to express who I am as a coach. And so I shared a couple of the pages, and really the goal is the same as Coach Doty in that I want to help elevate and amplify coaches and to put their best foot forward. And a lot of that is the deep thought that goes into creating a vision and a mission statement and your core beliefs and figuring out who you are as a person and as a coach. And kind of piecing that all together in some coherent, format to share with people, whether that's your players or other coaches or administrators or whomever. It's just kind of an opportunity to say, this is who I am and this is what I'm capable of. And so I shared it, to, I guess, pass it along and see if some other people might be able to pick it up and spark some deep thought for them.
Now, when we were messing back and forth, you wanted to talk culture, and we'll hit it on both aspects, both from a kick return and a tight end perspective.
Yeah.
But let's start with the tight ends, and how do you build that? Because tight ends, H-backs, whatever you want to call them, they're kind of, most schools have that hybrid tight end H-back role, and I've talked to Coach Rudolph. You guys use y'all's very. It's kind of the Swiss Army knife of your offense. And it is for like a lot of college coaches that have learned how to truly use them. They they line up on line of scrimmage, they're in the backfield. But how do you build that culture and start that teaching process in your room?
Yeah. Well, the first piece of that is understanding that as a position coach, your job is to be in alignment with the team culture. So that's set above me by our head coach. So our culture is rise up, and that's respect, integrity, service, effort, unity, perseverance. And those values are not just written on the walls of the locker room or the hallway. Those are the things that we live by. And so in looking at those values, I want to make sure that I'm not, saying something that's contradictory to that I'm taking what does it mean to live, to show effort as a tight end at Ohio University. What does it mean to have perseverance? And so that's a collective thing that we've, done with the tight ends is say, hey, you guys have, years of experience being a tight end here. You've practiced here, you've sweat, you've played here. What does perseverance mean in the context of being a tight end? What does unity mean in the context of being a tight end? And I've, really pushed the guys to be specific about those examples. So it's, showing perseverance is running a seam on 4 verts, not getting the ball thrown to you, and then jogging back to the line of scrimmage to do a axe block on split zone. Yeah. That's perseverance. Okay. That's pushing through adversity, et cetera, et cetera. So, as far as building a unit culture, the first step is being in alignment with the team culture at large. And then, the second step in my mind is making sure that there's some concrete examples of what that looks like for your position. So, like you said, we're the Swiss Army knives, right? We're the chess pieces. And when we evaluate film and try to bring in tight ends, we want guys that are matchup issues. That's the Travis Kelce is split out as the X. We're trying to find guys who can change the numbers in our favor and give us an advantage on offense, whether we're getting them the ball or forcing the defense's hand to get the ball in somebody else's hands. And so with that knowledge, we're trying to develop the culture of, there needs to be some understanding of everything that's going on. You need to put forth the effort. You need to be of service to the team, and do some things that maybe, you wouldn't otherwise want to do. It's not always about the glory as the tight end position. You're sometimes having to cut off a guy that weighs 50 pounds more than you, or, run a decoy route, so to speak, or be later in the progression instead of the first read. So, it's kind of making sure that, you're amplifying, you're echoing the message that the head coach is making. And you want to be in alignment with it. And then you need to make it come to life for the players. So, as far as culture, the other thing I would add, just in general about culture, like I've been influenced a lot by Tim and Brian Kite, who I'm sure you're familiar with because of their relationship with Ohio State. And they talk about culture being beliefs, behaviors, and experiences. And that when you're, creating your culture playbook of who you are and what you're all about, that's what it comes down to. So, I like to try to make things, in the context of what do we believe? What are the behaviors that are in alignment with that? And then what are the ultimate, experiences that we're giving to our teammates and to each other by, acting in those ways.
Okay. And then, like I said, I want to continue with tight ends before we move to the kick return stuff. Yeah. And how do you structure, because obviously in practice you're going to get a really limited amount of time for Indy. Yeah. And I've talked to Coach Rudolph a little bit about this, but then you're going to be with O-line for this section to run whatever run game you need to do. You'll go to pass. Yep. You guys will be split over here to pass game for this stuff. How do you manage not only your meeting? Okay, this is what I got hit because you essentially got the same meeting time or less than your other groups, and I got to hit this, and this for this, and this, and this, and then also transition out of the field. How do you maximize your time, especially for your kids that are getting split up in a variety of areas?
Yeah. It's the question that everybody has to deal with, right? There's never enough time, right? First is trying to maximize the time that you have in the meeting room, pre-practice, post-practice, special team drills, grabbing the guys when you can. The other thing that, probably the biggest issue that I've identified in teaching is that I think a lot of times we don't always understand what the most important aspects of our game plan are. Okay, we think we're an inside zone team, and then we run the numbers at the end of the season, and really we ran just as much gap scheme as inside zone, for example. Or, hey, we think we run a lot of option routes, but in general, we're actually running a lot more, square cut digs and basics and square ends, whatever it may be. And so coming in as a first-time tight ends coach, my first step that I did before last spring, spring of 2020 now, was look at the 2019 film, put the whole season together, and say, break it down by assignment, not just play, but hey, what did the tight end do on this play? And then that gave me a huge sense of, hey, there's really like 9 assignments that we do like 40% of the time. Or what, I'm sure there's some 80-20 principle, right? Yeah. But the idea is, okay, I'll give you a specific example. Last season, we ran the Matt Canada, now you're seeing it from BYU, the jet sweep with the arc, right? Yeah. And the quarterback's going to read and count. We ran that way more than I thought we would. And because we ran it in 12 personnel, there's 2 tight ends doing the same thing on that play. And it added up to be a greater percentage than things that I thought were like day one install. And so all this comes back to when you've got 5 minutes of practice or 10 minutes of practice for individual time with your 5 or 6 guys over in the corner of the field, with Coach Rudolph encroaching closer and closer and closer to my area. Okay. It's going back to those things, right? And it's understanding, okay, we may be asked to do this thing twice all season, but it's a part of this game plan. So we got to check the box. Okay. But it's also, kind of working backwards and understanding these are the top 10 things we do. So this becomes, an everyday drill rotation, or however you're going to function, whether you need pads, whether you don't need pads, whether you got the equipment, you got the sled, you don't have the sled. But yeah, you got to work backwards to some extent, because there's some things where it's same as enough, it's same as enough that you can cover it in a walkthrough, or it's same as enough that you can grab 3 guys during field goal and walk them through it and for half speed and walk it and all that stuff. Versus everybody needs to do this. We all need to learn it. We all need to rep it both ways, versus every look, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Now that's always the interesting peril, and I think coaches, a lot of them miss it, is, okay, what do we actually do? And what can we spend time with? Like, I remember, oh God, I was sitting in a special teams clinic years ago, and I was a coach from New Jersey, if I remember correctly. He's like, why do we practice all special teams evenly? You don't run them all evenly.
Mm-hmm.
Look at prior year's data and see what you actually, and that's what you need to focus on.
Great point.
Ideally, you're going to focus on kickoff, PAT.
I hope so.
And everything's more. I mean, your exemption of that would obviously be your punt team. Your punt team always needs to be good just in case something goes wrong, blah, blah. But it's a very good analogy to that standpoint. The same thing for offenses, especially if you're a position coach. What blocks do we actually do a lot? Or what routes are we going to actually run a lot? We're still going to teach everything, but like I won't spend 70-80% of my time on this instead of breaking it up evenly amongst these.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very good way to approach it. Now, when you did that study, did you just look at just the prior year, or since then have you gone back to even more years to kind of see if there's a theme by Coach Albin?
I didn't want to get, I don't think we've evolved that much, over the last couple of years. Obviously, you throw out, a couple concepts every year that were garbage, and you studied somebody, LSU or Alabama or whomever, and you throw in a couple more things. But I only went 1 year back, however, because I had a full 13 game sample size or whatever. But I added in this past season now, and then I did spring practice too, and so I could recognize, in spring, live clips, what were we doing the most versus our defense or whatever. I love that point about the New Jersey special teams coordinator, or that, and it's like, I feel like I have an advantage as somebody who didn't play the position that I'm coaching, that you're approaching it with a fresh perspective, and you're not just replicating the drills that, you did when, you were maybe in a different offense or in a different era or used in a different way. You're approaching it with some fresh eyes and keeping the end in mind and going from there. So I think the more you can apply it, whether it's special teams or tight end play or whatever, why do we need just the same amount of 7-on-7 as inside run if we're not a 50-50, run pass team, or, whatever.
Now, I know you've kind of been condensed with your spring practice usage because of COVID and all that unfortunate stuff. But what is your philosophy on how to approach spring practice from a development standpoint?
Well, I start by having individual goals for every guy. And so have pre-meetings and post-meetings so that guys understand what their main personal objectives are. I also have used spring as a time to focus so much more on techniques, fundamentals, and like the controllable, right? There isn't a game plan to discuss. There aren't coverages to teach. We can do football 101 at another time. It's really a time to focus on the developmental aspects of the game. And so, whereas we may be installing something on day 4, my emphasis in the meeting room may be on something that we're going to run, significantly more throughout the season, and may not be in perfect alignment with what we're doing on the field that day. If that makes sense, because I think a lot of times, we're such, you meet right before you go on the field. A lot of times you're playing catch up a little bit. You've got the script from your coordinator, you've got lunch, or however you're focused, however your system works.
Yeah. And
then you go into the meeting and you say, hey, this is what we're covering today. And I think using spring as a developmental time and recognizing the bigger picture, hey, maybe we're putting in 4 verts today, but really we need to talk about, the option route or the cutoff block or, something that we were poor at, and use it as a great time, because we get a lot more time with our athletes during spring, like you were mentioning, than we do during the winter or summer or other times of the year. So it starts with developing some individual goals for the guys. I've stolen a lot of stuff. I mentioned Meyer earlier. I stole Coach Tressel's, block O of life. The guys don't know it comes from Ohio State, but the personal, the vocational, the academic, and the physical goals, and talked about what can you control. Because I think that's our chief task in life, is to separate what we can control from what we can't. And a lot of times in football, guys have some serious lofty goals, right? I want to be named all conference, or I want to break the record for touchdowns by a tight end. And that can't all be done. They don't hand those awards out in March, but you can do the work in spring. And so trying to draw guys back to, okay, if you're gonna be all conference, and that's voted on by whomever, I don't know, Jason Candle, and I don't know, I don't even know who votes on the all conference team. But if you're gonna be named all conference, okay, what do you need to do? Oh, you need to increase your bench because your strength is not where it needs to be, or you got to make your hands more reliable as a pass catcher on some underneath routes. Well, let's catch some balls after practice, and all those things, and kind of draw guys back to the process a little bit.
Okay. And then I won't hit a couple other things before we go. And obviously you had plenty of time during COVID to look at X, Y, Z. Like I said, you kind of said you broke down blocks. What else? How else did you learn from the COVID break time? And it's not really a break or time off,
yeah.
but it's a seclusion. You're not really allowed in the office. You're not allowed around the kids, and we were all like that. How did you maximize that time?
Yeah. Well, every disadvantage has its advantage, and for me, I've used COVID in a way to continue to study the game from different people and different perspectives. I've not been the person jumping on a lot of the Zooms. I've been listening to a lot of them. I've been downloading the podcasts from various people, and if I got a long commute, I'm listening to podcasts. I'm trying to study, and I'm trying to approach the game, with a beginner's mindset. And so for me, COVID, it really only amplified the existing, or accelerated the existing, hunger to learn, right? I think for most young coaches, they need to have a certain sense of urgency about getting better, and it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to not know. And trust me, I don't know a lot. I know I don't know a lot. I got to keep learning, and I got to keep growing. And for me, COVID has been a huge opportunity to dig deep into stuff that I don't know a whole lot about. I love. When I got this job, I had to learn as much as I possibly could about tight end play. And during COVID, I've also tried to learn as much as I possibly could about kickoff return, about defense, about strength and conditioning and nutrition and other things that are kind of auxiliary and touch on elite development, or elite performance. And so that's been my main thing, is having conversations with people that are a lot wiser than me, listening in on some conversations like on podcasts and Zooms and things like that. And then also kind of reserving some time for putting my thoughts on paper. So, I finally finished, so to speak, although it's always a work in progress, my tight end manual for the guys, all the diagrams that you never have time to get in and do, all that kind of stuff. And it's never finished, but it's in a good spot. So, which I feel okay about. Just having that approach and using the time as wisely as I can.
Well, that's in our conversation I had with Coach Rudolph is, we talked a little bit about playbooks, me and him one-on-one, and we both you're never happy with it. Like there's either aesthetically how it looks, or it's missing something, or the words right for this just don't sound right or look right, or that rule could be a little bit better. How do I there's something always wrong with it, and that is what that is. And it's the same thing with manuals, and it's that same rabbit hole of just you're never happy, and you're always trying to figure out how's a better way you can do it. Now you mentioned you listen to a lot of areas. Is there any particular person you like listening to or following, or a person's offensive system that you kind of like to pay attention to, or see what they're saying recently?
Tim Albin, our offensive coordinator.
Good save.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think one of the best things that I can share is that part of the growth is in applying things that aren't necessarily perfectly fit to what you do, right? It's taking, like I love listening to Ryan Holiday. I love the Daily Stoic. Okay, I love his work. Ego is the enemy. Stillness is key. I mean, I've read every book he's written. He's not a football guy.
Yeah.
But I take that and I apply it. And so, to answer your question in a football specific, sense, yeah, I love studying teams that do 12 personnel stuff, just like we do. But hey, I looked at this offseason. I had our great video coordinator, Ryan Bainbridge, download the NFL film for the teams that were in the most 12 and 21. And so that was the Green Bay Packers and the Oakland Raiders. And so, I pulled up a bunch of really, really good 12 personnel stuff, and some of it fits what we do. We don't get under center with the fullback. So you could say that doesn't apply. But I mean, I think that's one of the keys, is looking at some things that are, closely similar in the game. And then also stuff that's completely, outside of the game. So yeah, I mean, I listened to, we talked about coach and coordinator podcast before we got on. I listened to coach and coordinator podcast. I listened to Run the Power. I listened to, Move the Chains, or whatever the NFL podcast is, NFL Network podcast is, GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi. A lot of them keep me in the loop of things that are going on in the game, trends, and spark some internal dialogue. And then I try to apply it as best I can to the position group.
Okay, Coach. Now, last couple of questions, and we'll end it with the kick return too. But before we get to there, I mean, you mentioned Coach Albin there. What have you kind of been able to take away from Coach Albin, your time working with Coach?
So much. He's one of my closest mentors, and he's a phenomenal person, an incredibly genuine person who cares about the student athletes, the school, and has repeatedly made personal sacrifices for the betterment of this program. And so just by witnessing how he carries himself, the load of, mental responsibility that he's been Coach Solich's right-hand man here for 16 years. And not just the, soft skills of being a reliable VP, but he's also coordinated some ridiculously successful offenses here that are, along the likes of Alabama and Oklahoma and many programs that people, would consider the blue blood programs of college football the last decade. When the rubber meets the road, scoring offense and total points and, red zone and third down, it's all the names that you think of and Tim Albin. And, the process by which he's gotten there is he's incredibly detail oriented. He's got a great memory. And that's a skill that he's trained. And then he looks for patterns. He spends a lot of time in game planning. His main goal is putting players in a position to be successful. And, he's got some systems that have worked for him. And so, I mean, in general, the answer is, his character is phenomenal. He's a great person, and he does things the right way. And then on top of that, he thinks differently, specifically with tight end play, with run game, all of those things. And just the way he carries himself, I'm very, very lucky to, have basically been dropped out of a plane in Athens, Ohio, and found my way to, I'm like the young samurai. I found my way to his dojo, I guess.
And then the obvious follow-up to that is what have you learned from the legend there, Coach Solich, in your time there?
I mean, I've learned so much by the man's reputation precedes him. And, I think that a lot of times the perspective would be, that he can utilize that and he can just kind of, swing his sword blindly and just kind of be very brash and be out in front and say, this is, it's my way or the highway. He's very, very cautious, very careful, gathers information, makes smart decisions, puts the players first. And so when you talk about, leading a program, I think for me as a young coach who tends to be very self-assured, gathers the information and says, this is the only way to do it. I think he's he's sort of a natural, natural antagonist or pessimist, or a natural kind of, glass half empty type of person. And he's always kind of looking at things from the opposite perspective, and I mean that in a positive way, that he's sort of, he's able to look at things with his breadth of experience of 40 years coaching elite college football, and just listening and being around, and the way he carries himself has been really beneficial as somebody who's, entering the industry and doesn't know anything. It's been really, really nice.
And then let's swing back to kick return, because we kind of talked about at the beginning. Kick return, special teams in general is just different than every other beast, because you're trying to put usually about 3 to 4 position groups together that aren't, well, they work together on like offense, defense, but I'm saying in a meeting room situation, and we're all kind of mixed mash where we are on the field. And kick return especially, you could have offense, defensive guys on there, everybody. How do you create that culture and that buy-in for that room? And you also got a limited time. How do you do that in such a short time, even shorter probably than maybe your tight end room time?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to be able to speak the same language as the other coaches on special teams. And so for us, and we've got the way we handle special teams, it may be similar to other programs, and is that we've got a special teams coordinator who's the lead coach for 2 special teams. Coach Bonas does our kickoff unit and our punt. And then Coach D'Angelo Smith, our corners coach, handles punt return. And then I'm the tight ends coach, and I also handle kickoff return. And so we've got a lead coach for each unit. But when I talked about speaking the same language, we've had to be in unison in the terminology that we use, so that we can sort of steal reps, so to speak, when we're showing a kickoff clip. And wow, this is a great example of a guy crossing face and beating it with speed. Well, those are the buzzwords that Coach Bonas is using, coaching the kickoff unit. And I'm teaching kickoff return, and I could just say, hey, that's a really good job by number 17 in orange right there. But we're able to steal a rep, so to speak, and make it a kickoff return and a kickoff, visual clip. And then we work together on the field, and not every drill is competitive kickoff versus kickoff return, or punt versus punt return. But a lot of times, if it's a punt drill, for example, Coach Smith, who's in charge of our punt return unit, is going to be working with the scout team punt return and emphasizing the coaching points that are, the sheet might say punt drill, but Coach Smith is on the field and he's working with guys who maybe 3rd or 4th down on the depth chart, at L2 or whatever, but he's working and stealing those reps. And so for us, we want to be echoing the message, speaking the same language, being able to steal some reps, so that by the end of the year, they've heard it, they know when I'm talking it's kickoff return, but at the same time, it might be, half the time I'm talking about kickoff. And Coach Bonas has been phenomenal about that. We're all speaking the same language. And so you got to emphasize it and make it count, and then make the drills count. So that's, again, it's the same thing that we talked about with tight end play, that you kind of have to approach it like, okay, what do we actually see? What actually happens on the field? And, I'll give you an example. For our scheme, we've got 4 parts of kickoff return. Okay. We're a 6-3-2 return unit. So 6 in the front line, 3 fullback tight ends, and 2 returners. Okay. So in the front line, we've got a play side and a back side. We've got the fullbacks, which are like the wedge, and then the returners. Well, based off our scheme, 4 guys are doing, backside set a wall. We've got 4 guys that are doing the same thing. Okay. So 4 out of 11. And then we said, okay, well, there's really 2 things that can happen. The kickoff unit guy is going to either cross his face or try to beat it with speed and go the long, hard way. Okay. You're trying to be between your man and the ball. We watched our film from 2018 and 2019, and over 90% of the time, the guy tries to cross face. And so when we're drilling stuff, we used to say, all right, blow the whistle, it's halfway through the drill. Now the scout's going to go this way. Okay. But in reality, to replicate what was going on the field, it was, you were getting 90% of the time, the scout needs to go across his face instead of trying to go the long, hard way and run around. And so modifying the drill, understanding what's happening on the field, those were all equally important in special teams also.
Now, I have to ask this question because it seems like you take a lot of data approaches to everything you do. What did you major in at Notre Dame?
Just a generic liberal arts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's no. I got asked because like it seems like you have a very math oriented background, which is fine because that's like when I talked to Brent Dearman, he's a bachelor's in math, so like it makes sense how he approaches the field. But one of the things I love about this conversation, and if anybody takes away anything from it, is how you use prior season data. Okay, this is what we saw, blah blah blah, or this is what we did. This amount of percentage, so this is what we're going to focus on. And I think it's a very good analytical approach to handle it.
Yeah. Like I want evidence, right? Like, and that's what you want. Like you can say, when you're grading film, you want, okay, is there evidence that what we're doing in practice is translating to our guys performing on the field? Well, our guys graded out at, 100% when they're doing this, but 50% when they're doing this. All right, well then maybe we need to get better at the thing that we're not good at. And I alluded to it earlier, and I've said it multiple times, and I'm dead serious about it. You have to know what you don't know. And so as we're having this conversation, I was a student manager. I snapped the ball in college. Okay. I played for a wing T. I played receiver in a wing T offense in high school. Okay. Now I learned football. I learned how to be tough. I mean, I learned teamwork. I learned all those things, and we were really freaking good. But I know what I don't know. And so I've earned these opportunities based off of being able to work and being able to get the job done and being able to think critically. But like, hey, you get a new assignment, right? You're a new OC or you're a new DC or you got moved from safeties to linebackers. You should probably look at last year's film or the year, a couple years before that and say, kind of diagnose the problem and find the evidence and say, wow, the kids really seem to understand this coverage, or it seems to really fit our players' skill level or their general athleticism or whatever. And that's the goal, is to put the kids in a position to be successful. So if you're able to look at the evidence and say, not that you want to put limits on what the kids can get done, but at the same time you want to be realistic about it, and then you want to focus on getting better at the things you need to get better at.
Okay, that's perfect, Coach. Cool. Kind of to end, Coach, and I almost forgot this question, but I think it would be ironic if I didn't ask, given the fact that he told me to be hard on you. You got any good Coach Rudolph stories that can actually be said on that aren't like rated X or R?
Yeah, suitable for work stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I got a lot of them. How much time do you have?
Well, I mean.
I will say, okay, so my favorite, Coach Rudolph's one of a kind. Okay. Yes. There aren't a lot of Charles Allen Rudy Rudolphs walking around this earth. Okay. Coach Rudolph is best friends with everybody in the state of Louisiana. Okay. He goes way back with everybody from the state of Louisiana. So the thing that I've picked up, and this is not a one-off story, but the way that you describe being close to somebody in the state of Louisiana or, Mississippi. So I'm from Tennessee, so this is not that far north. Okay. Yeah. Is that you say you split a 2-piece with them. Okay. So what that means is I go so far back with this dude that when we were dirt poor, we didn't have anything. We would go down to Dairy Queen or, Chicken E or whatever and get a 2-piece chicken strip basket because we couldn't afford the 4, 6, or 8, and we would split it. So that's, that's my, if I'm going to tell anybody, a story about Coach Rudolph, it's that, he knows he split a 2-piece with about every high school coach from here to, Montgomery, Alabama.
That works, and I think that's a good place to end it, Coach. So, coaches, make sure you Coach a follow on Twitter. His stuff will be below. If you want to check out his kick return clinic, it is on the Ohio High School Football Coaches Association's spring virtual clinic that we did last year. Coach was nice enough to speak on behalf of Ohio University. Make sure you check that out if you're interested in that. Make sure you check out our sponsors and affiliates below. As normal, they're at the very top of the bio if you want to check those out. If there's any point in this you want to go back to, the tags will be in the bio as well. Make sure you check those out. And thank you, and appreciate you listening to our episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.